If you're thinking of making a career change, you're in the right place. I'm Yesim Nicholson, and Your Big Career Move is your opportunity to listen to stories from ordinary people who've made extraordinary career changes. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and if you feel inspired to make your own career change, but you're not quite sure where to start, why not buy my book, Ready to Quit Your Job, or join my next career coaching program, both of which you can find at yescareercoaching.com. Today I'm here with Dr. Leke Asong, and I was really excited to speak to him because you are a practicing GP, but you're also, a little bit famous. Is it fair to say a little bit famous on social media now? You talk about gut
Yeah.
health a lot, which is at the forefront at so many people's minds at the moment. It's talked about so much that you just seem to be in the right place at the right time. I think that people are really open to hearing about how their gut health is affecting their overall health. And I guess I was just really intrigued by how you sustain a career as a GP and also have time to do all this, create all this content that is, really useful to people at this time because you're on social media, but you've also written at least two books that I'm aware of, and you've got a
Yeah,
host of
super.
ebooks. And it's like, I don't know, it's almost like there's five of you all working in tandem. So I was really curious to speak to you in more detail about your career and how you've got to a point where you seem to be able to do 100 things at once. So, welcome to the show. Can we talk about, first of all,
Thank
how
you so
you
much.
got into being a medical professional?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Yeshim. So my dad was a surgeon, so I kind of grew up in a medical household, so that's how it all started. Um, and I always wanted to fix things. So in a way, no one thinks about this, but medicine's actually fixing things and finding solutions. So that's why I was fascinated by medicine.
Yeah. And did your dad want you to go into medicine?
I think so, in a way. I think if you grow up in a medical household or any kind of professional household, you kind of gravitate towards one parent. I think it's a natural thing because you hear about medicine all the time and clinical cases, and becomes a natural thing in a way. Doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does.
Yeah. So, was it something that you would talk about at home when
Yeah,
you
my
were?
dad talk about stories and patients and what he found and stuff like that. So that kind of just through diffusion, it
Yeah.
made me kind.
Well,
Yeah.
it can go either way, can't it? Because I definitely come across people where their parents talked about their work quite a lot when they were growing up, and it had the opposite effect on them that they just
Yeah.
have anything to do with that sort of career. So obviously it had a, let's say, a positive effect on you when you were growing up, and it sounds like you're inspired to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, I think I can do many things. Not to blow my horn, I could do, yeah. Because when I was young, I remember thinking, I want to become a pilot. I want to become a designer. There was so many things I wanted to become. So I'm quite flexible in that way.
Yeah.
Um,
So what made you decide that actually medicine was the way forward if you had all these ideas of things you wanted to do or could do?
I don't know. I think it just happened. Yeah, there's no specific reason. Because now, for example, I do product design as well. So that's another thing I do. So that's what I'm saying. I can just do different things. I've
Yeah.
never, yeah. A friend of mine once told me, because you know what, you're so lucky because I can only do medicine, he said. And I'd never considered that. I never thought about myself in that way. I just thought I'd just do things. But when he said that, I thought, oh gosh, yeah, I can do different things.
Yeah. So was that something that even at the beginning of your career, were you thinking that I'm not limiting myself to just being a GP?
No, I think at the beginning, once you get into medical school and GP training, then you get so focused. There's no time. Some people manage to do it, but I didn't. I just did that.
Mm.
It's only years into GP training, sorry, into GP as a GP, then I thought, do you know what, I need something else because it became too intense, and I thought I need to rekindle my other passions, and that's how it all started.
What does that mean it became too intense? In what way?
Oh gosh, well, patience and the workload. I worked in a practice that had, I think, 33,000 patients. Yeah, it was in one building, by the way, and had two floors, and the receptions. everywhere, and it was like going to a busy stock exchange, stock market with noise everywhere. And in those days, I saw 18 patients in the morning, 18 in the afternoon, and 4 home visits every day. Yeah, there's 40 patients. So at the start of your career, you can do it, you're energetic and you're going for it. And then after a while, your body starts just breaking down bit by bit. So I remember thinking, gosh, I just can't take it anymore. And what I found, if I did other things outside medicine, I became a bit more balanced.
Mm.
And that's how it all started.
What were those other things that you were doing?
Yeah, so the first thing I thought about was a board game for some reason. I was driving home one day from work and I thought, gosh, I need to do something else. So I thought about the board game, which has never come out in the end. I've still got it. I might release it one day.
You heard it
And
here
after
first.
that, I know. Then after that, I thought, you know what? I like designing stuff. I like to build stuff. So I built a kind of kitchen gadget and I was watching all these programs about inventions and licensing. And yeah, one December, I think it was 2018, I think, I was watching this program and they said, yeah, you can license your own product, you can invent and this and that. And I just subscribed to the program, started inventing stuff. And within a year, I managed to invent something that had a licensing deal, an American company.
No way.
Um, yeah, so I just started doing that. And then I stopped for a bit and then I started again. So in a way, I think necessity makes people do things.
Mm.
Yeah, I was reading a book once and about companies, startups, and people who started companies. And there was an interview, and they asked this guy, "So, what inspired you to start your company?" And he said, "My boss." And I said, "What did your boss say?" And he said, "My boss said that you're fired." So, so yeah, out of difficult situations, things happen.
I absolutely love that.
You're fired.
But I mean, you say that. You say, yes, it was a necessity and it made me do it. And I think, from the work that I do, when I'm speaking to so many people who haven't quite reached that point where it feels necessary. They just have a sort of an inkling that maybe they could or should be doing something else. So I'm always intrigued at where's the tipping point? Because sometimes we do need that. And actually, that was one of the other reasons I was really excited to talk to you, is because I see so many people where their health becomes a real issue because they're living a life that's very stressful, continuously stressful, day in, day out, and they don't take time for themselves. There's zero or very little self-care. And
Yeah,
and then, as you know better than anybody, your body starts giving you signs that actually this isn't sustainable. And those signs get louder and louder and louder until one day, I mean, I've had people who have been paralyzed from the waist down, literally from
gosh.
one minute to the next. I've had, real physical breakdowns. And
Hmm.
that's what then gives them that final push to go, well, this isn't sustainable. I need to make a change. So I'm really happy to hear that for you. It sounds like it didn't reach that breaking point. You just, well, I don't know. I mean, you tell me.
I think it did. I think when I was driving back, I was just exhausted. Like my brain, I couldn't think. I think I'd done four home visits. They were really far apart, and I'd seen, 36 patients. And I thought, gosh, I can't think. Can I continue at this pace? I was asking myself that I was driving home. The sun was out. I think it was in the summer. I was
Mhm.
driving back, and I thought, gosh, I don't think I can continue at this pace. And yeah, I think that's the moment. I've got different moments for different things. I tell you a good moment where there's a very clear moment. When I left the second job I had to become a locum. So I'd seen, it was a busy on call and I'd seen 70 patients,
Wow.
70, yeah. And I was driving back home and it was late at night, about 7 o'clock. And I heard a loud bang and I'd crashed against some sort of boulder next to the petrol station. And all I remember, everyone just turned in my direction and looked at me like that. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to kill myself really here. So I went home and I just parked my car and I put my head down, rested against the steering, and I thought, my goodness, this is tough. Then
Mhm.
another time, my daughter, who was 4, so I think it was a Saturday, she goes, Daddy, do you want to play with us? She goes, it's all right, you're tired. She
Oh.
was 4. And I thought, oh my goodness, a 4-year-old
Mm.
can tell how tired dad is. So I went up to my study, I remember at 2 in the morning, and I wrote my resignation letter. And in
Wow.
the morning, I came and I gave it to the practice manager and walked off. And she opened it, it was a big envelope. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, you're leaving." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can't take it anymore." And I became a locum from then on.
I love that you're smiling and almost laughing as you're retelling this story. Why is that?
Yeah, um, I think in a way I'm thinking, how did I last that long? And I just looking back, I think we can. I think habit is an interesting thing. You can be trapped in this maze where you're doing things repetitively all the time, repetitively for years, without realizing how bad things are.
Yeah.
I remember my appraiser, he came once and he said, you don't realize how hard work, how busy your practice is compared to other practices. Because I didn't really know. I just saw patients and that was it. I didn't really think this is quite unsustainable and I can't keep on doing it. You just get up in the morning, go to work, see patients, and go back. And you're in this cycle, which is difficult to break. And you're right, unless something really happens that triggers you. And some people, even if it happens, they still go back anyway. You need that courage to just move away and say, that is it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, if it's ill health, then that's an easier one to move. But every time I did locums, I'll go around and I'll ask, well, how come there's a doctor off? And they'll tell me, it'll be like, oh, you've had a stroke, or they collapsed, or they had MS. Always, oh, so I always knew that this job, chronic stress was such a bad thing. And I
Yeah.
knew this job was quite a tough one. And interestingly, I'd never been stressed before when I started general practice. I know it's a strange thing to say. I've written a few blogs. I just never knew what stress was. Because I remember when I finished GP training, I went to an interview, partnership interview, and they asked a few questions. And one of the questions was, what do you do when you're stressed? And I thought, I said, yeah, stress is a physiological reaction and this and that. And the practice manager goes, yeah, I know what it is, but what do you do when you're stressed? So I didn't know what to say because I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's a true story. I didn't know, like, what's stress?
Yeah.
And so I didn't get the job. So when I called for feedback, they said, yeah, you did quite well, but you didn't answer the question, what you do when you're stressed. The other candidate had a better answer.
Oh,
So that's
isn't
why I
that
didn't get the job.
fascinating?
I know, which is interesting because really I'm the best candidate because I've never been stressed, so it should give me the job.
You think
But
so?
I didn't answer the question correctly.
But Dr. Leke, you won't be able to empathize with somebody that is suffering from stress if you haven't experienced it yourself.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, depression, stress, what's the difference? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, quite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a, this is, I'm going a little bit off on a tangent, but talking about
Yeah.
depression, is there a, to your knowledge and your experience, is there a
Hmm.
link between your gut health and your mental health?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. There's a whole gut-brain barrier. So your gut is linked to your brain by the vagus nerve,
Hmm.
and you've got neurotransmitters in the gut. Your serotonin and dopamine, they're all made in the gut. So a lot, well, I don't know what percentage, but there's a percentage of depression and anxiety and stress, which is not mental health per se. It is mental health, but it's coming from the gut.
So
And it could
fascinating.
just be the food you're eating, for example. I mean, people won't believe it, but it's true. If you're eating lots of processed foods, you cause gut inflammation, and
Mhm.
that can affect your mood, and you'd seem depressed. So
And do you
that's
see
a
a
real
lot of
thing.
that at the moment?
As a functional medicine, yes. As a GP, yes, as well. But you've got 10 minutes as a GP. And in some cases, if you try to explore the kind of nutritional route, some patients are not interested
Yeah.
because they want a tablet, they want an antidepressant.
Yeah.
So that is it. So over the years, I've learned to kind of profile different patients, and I can tell if they'll be receptive or not. And if I can tell they won't be, then there's no point because you might even end up with a complaint, even saying the GP was talking about food when I came for my depression. It happened to me actually. I was talking to a patient about exercise and endorphin levels making you feel good. And she went to another GP and said, I came with mental health and the patient doctor telling me about exercise. So yeah, you got to be
And she
careful
couldn't
sometimes.
see that there was a correlation. Mm,
Not at all. No.
yeah,
They
it's
want a
tricky
quick
because I
fix tablet and
suppose
that's it.
I was thinking earlier today that I suppose let's say 50, probably actually less, maybe 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was wondering whether 30 years ago you were much more dependent on what your GP, your family doctor told you, and you were more likely to follow their advice than perhaps today, where a lot of people will use Google or, some kind of internet search, AI even maybe now, put in their symptoms and go, dear AI, what do you think is wrong with me based on these symptoms? How's people's reaction to their doctors changed over the last 20, 30 years, do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's more about, I think I've got this. Can you refer me here? Or so you're starting off by trying to either disprove the patient what they've read or what they've researched, as opposed to going from basics.
Yeah.
And the thing about Google and searches, you can search, a search engine can confirm your bias. You can, if you think of I've got depression, you're going to find an article that says so. If you think I've got ADHD, it's going to tell you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of changed. Patients are saying, I think I've got this and I need this drug because I've researched it and the NHS have done clinical trials and can you prescribe it to me? So that's how it's all changed. And even if you tell them that that's not the case, in some cases it just doesn't work. They might go to another person to get a second opinion.
Yeah.
So it's changed.
It's tricky, isn't it? And I suppose every patient that you're spending time with, you're almost trying to assess how much they've already looked into what they can do for themselves before they've got to you, or are they just coming to you, at the first sign of a little cough? So it's I always have this thing with my GP where I'm like, I don't want to be that hypochondriac, but also I don't want to be that person that, could have prevented some horrible disease if I'd nipped it in the bud early on. And it's always finding that middle ground, like at what point do I go to the GP?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's a good thing to research. I mean, some patients say, "Oh, sorry, I Googled my symptoms." I think it's actually good in a way because if I explain what I think you have, then you're more likely to understand. I think if you have some sort of prior knowledge, it's a lot more difficult if they've got no prior knowledge whatsoever.
Yeah,
If they've researched their symptoms and they say, "Do you know what, I think I've got, I don't know, lupus," I could say, well, it's not lupus because you haven't got this, that, and that. And even if you did, this doesn't match. And it's a lot easier, I think. It is difficult if someone is so, it depends on people's characters. If they're really obstinate and think, I know I've got this, and is that, then it gets more difficult. But if
yeah.
the patient's open-minded enough to listen, then it works for both doctor and patient, I
So
think.
is this to anybody that's listening that's wondering at what point should I go to the GP? Maybe do a bit of research yourself and then go and see your doctor and be open-minded that, whatever your internet search might have told you might not be correct.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point. I think that's where education comes into place because you need to have some sort of basic knowledge.
Yeah.
Because if not, then everything seems dangerous. And in the old days, I know grandma and you had folk remedies and ginger, garlic, and all this, but for some reason, no one seems to want to use any of these remedies or go over the counter.
Yeah.
But yeah, a Google search with no information whatsoever is a disaster. So yeah, some knowledge is important to know, and then alongside a Google search, some things are just simple knowledge. If you've got a cough for one day, you shouldn't come to a doctor, but many people do, or
Yeah.
sore throat for 1 hour. I've got a case like that, many cases. A 9 o'clock first appointment, sore throat, sin 6 o'clock in the morning, and then they book an
Yeah.
appointment. So
Well, they were
so
lucky to get
even
an
without any
appointment, I
knowledge,
would
she,
say.
sorry.
They were lucky to get an appointment at such
Oh
short
God, yes,
notice.
that's another
This is good
discussion.
news.
Yeah, I managed to get an appointment. Yeah. Oh
So we've
God,
got off track. Look, before I hit record, I
I
did
know,
warn you
totally
that
off tangent. Sorry.
I could probably talk to you for days because I'm so fascinated by health and what we can do for ourselves, and at what point we need to seek out a specialist like yourself. And we are meant to be talking about your career, so we'll go back to that because
We'll go back
the
to
last thing you
career.
told me is that you handed in your resignation, and
Yeah,
was it the practice manager? Is that would that be the right?
yeah.
Was a little
Practice
bit freaked
manager.
out by the sounds of it. So what happened next?
Then I went to another practice, and then the job was also probably even more difficult than the first one.
Oh gosh.
And then I then left that one as well.
Right. Okay. So in my book, I talk about people who are toe dippers, and they're the ones that know that probably at some point in their career, that in the not so distant future, they're going to make a change to their current work situation, and they're going to go off and do something else. So they do a bit of toe dipping. So, maybe starting a side hustle or trying out, volunteering in another area, or something along those lines. But I also talk about the multi-hyphenate, who is somebody who isn't satisfied by just doing one role forever for their whole lives, and likes to have lots of different projects on the go. It sounds like you like to have lots of things on the go because you're interested and you're good at lots of different things. But it would
Mhm.
be interesting to hear from you how your career has evolved to become what it is today. How have you gone from being a full-time GP, seeing 70 patients to, um, and I'm not devaluing anything that's on I only follow you on Instagram, and I'm not, you share some really fantastic information on your Instagram, but also, anybody listening, please check out Dr. Leke's Instagram, and I'll put the link in the show notes. You should go just to watch your dance moves. I mean, you're
All right.
a multi-talented man.
Thank you.
So yes. So how do you go from being this full-time GP who has zero time for much outside of work, not even time to play with your 4-year-old, to
Hmm.
seemingly doing, six or seven different things and having fun with it?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I think as a locum, you've got a bit more control. So if, for example, I get too tired, I'll just take time off. So GPs work really hard, so it's quite a tough job. People don't see behind the scenes of a GP. So I tell my friends, oh, I see 30 people a day or 40, and they think, what? That's quite a lot. The waiting room is always empty. Well, because there's lots of stuff behind the scenes, and there's paperwork and there's all of this stuff. So if I go to a practice and I like it, then I do a lot more work there. If I don't like the practice and it's so busy or unsafe or not enough appointments, then I'll just leave. So I think that flexibility gives you enough time to do other things. So on my day off, for example, I could say I'm not going to work for a week. I do just gut health stuff, and I'll just see more gut health clients.
Yeah.
And if, for example, the week after, I think, oh, do you know what? I feel like inventing something, I'll just do that.
Mhm.
And even if I'm seeing patients, I could do a week of practice work, and then after work, I'll then get in my study and do something else.
Yeah.
I think it's all about balance and knowing when to do more of A or B or C or D. But if you've got a full-time job as a partner or salaried, it's a little bit more difficult, can be done, but it's quite taxing and depends on the practice because every practice is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to answer your question, it's just doing different things at the right dose, at the right pace, right intensity, and that keeps you nice and mellow, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, and I'm aware that I might be a little bit biased, but to me, at least from the outside looking in, you've created the perfect career for yourself, that you're engaging in activities that you find interesting and energizing, and you're using all these different skills that you have, and you're finding joy in the work. I think that it comes across like you're finding the joy in your work, which I think is really lovely. And I wish that for other people. And yet there's a part of me that thinks, what if every GP decided to go locum? What would the impact on the NHS be if every GP suddenly found this wonderful balance that you've managed to find?
Wow, it's a good question. Tough one.
I
I
said
don't
this
think
wasn't
every
going to be
GP.
easy. I warned you.
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be this stuff. Well, okay, one, I don't think every GP can go as a locum. That's just an aside thing because job security and people don't like, you need to like change in a different practice, different times of the week, even or even day, you could have two different sites. Yeah, so that GPs won't do that. But two, you're right. What if it were to happen? Then maybe there would be an NHS, and but in a way, the locums would become like the regular doctors. Because if I locum at a place for 6 months, I'm like a regular doctor there. But I think all of this is out of necessity as well, because the current system, I don't think is sustainable. Uh, the current model in primary care is not sustainable, I don't think, in the current climate. Lots of chronic disease, people are very complex, especially after COVID. People have really strange, in quotes, symptoms, and you're given 10 minutes to work. So, in a way, I call it conveyor belt medicine. You've got 10 minutes, quickly do one thing, come with one problem. And I'm guilty of that. I tell patients all the time, one problem. And I feel bad every day I go home. Because I just think, you know what, I'd wish to spend half an hour with this patient, but I can't because I've got 30 people. If I were to spend half an hour with one patient and I've got 30, I'm never going to leave the practice. And I've got to do blood tests, I've got to do letters from the consultant, I've got to do, so there's so much stuff. So the current model is almost set up for failure. Uh, I've put in an Instagram post a few years ago. The current medical model guarantees two things: doctor burnout or continuous chronic disease. Because you're sorting one little thing in 10 minutes, another little thing. But the problem could be sorted in half an hour, 40 minutes, but it's not sustainable. I mean, the demand is higher than the supply, and which is for a variety of reasons, funding from the government, the current actual medical model, and I would say to a degree, some patients abuse the system. No one talks about this because people are scared, but some patients abuse, like I said, a cold or sore throat for 2 hours, and they're booking in.
Yeah,
Then maybe you've got a 90-year-old at home who really needs a GP, the diabetes is off the charts, but each time they call, they can't get through.
yeah,
Then you got someone who sore throat for 2 hours, they're in there.
yeah.
Or can I have a letter because I don't want to go to court? These kind of things clog up the system, and then the people who really need it can't get in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it needs a
How
radical
much
rethink.
does it, the NHS employs some of the most intelligent people in the country. I always
Mm.
wonder, and you can maybe finally give me the answer. I always wonder how much they consult people like you who work within the NHS about how, we keep talking about the system's broken,
Mm.
how, how you think it could be fixed. Is there any consulting, you guys,
I
on?
don't think so. No. Um, I mean, the recent person that got the consulted was Lord Darcy. He's a surgeon actually, and he's done some report on primary care and how it can be changed. As far as I know, they haven't consulted GPs. And even if they did, it depends who they consult as well. And it depends what their interests are.
Yeah,
It's always a complex thing, such a big organization, the NHS.
yeah.
But I think there's something called open innovation, where companies are open to ideas for change.
Hmm.
I think that would be a good thing for the NHS. Just ask patients, so
Yeah,
what would you like? What did you like about this? And they can have some sort of body or organization to really feed in, to give some feedback about how to change.
yeah.
That
What
would
do
be
you,
useful. Yeah, and consult grassroots GPs.
yeah. What do you think's the main reason somebody would not go into medicine in this country?
Oh gosh, so many. Um, One, yeah, the appointment system, too many patients as a GP. Uh, Hospital medicine, I think it's also very busy. I mean, imagine A&E now. They're totally swamped. So yeah, and also the pay is not that good
Mhm,
compared to other countries. The amount of work you're doing, you're not getting paid that well.
mhm.
Again, people dodge this topic because I think pay or money is a taboo thing in England. You don't talk about money. But if you go to other countries, doctors are paid more. So for what you do here, you get a lot more in Australia, Canada, Middle East. So all my colleagues, for example, all my friends, well, most of them have all just left, gone to Canada. I've got about 6 or 7 friends gone to Canada. I met one yesterday, he's going to Australia in April. So everyone's leaving, basically.
Gosh, it's really depressing to hear because we need really good people in the NHS who are able to be in a position to look after themselves so that they can look after us well. I feel really passionate about this, that as much as my work is about helping people to change careers as and when the time's right for them, I feel really conflicted about working with NHS and actually teachers as well because I'm like, but we
Hmm.
need really good people to stay in these jobs. And I'm always curious about what can be done, in the system, but also on an individual level, like you've done. What can I do to still contribute to the NHS in a really positive way while looking after
Hmm.
myself and fulfilling other areas of my interest, my life that I really want to on the side as well. And like, it sounds like you've cracked it. Do you feel like you've cracked it? Working on the things that are meaningful to you.
I think it's a continuous process. I think to a degree I have. I think it's a journey. I don't think you've never ever really crack it completely. But I'm on the right path, I think,
Yeah.
of cracking it. I think I would crack it fully, maybe, if, let's say, if I were booked back to back in the gut health medic sector. So I'm not booked back to back, because demand has gone down a bit because no one's got any money. That's just the reality of the situation. So people think twice. I might have a chat with someone, yeah, they'll think about it, I'll see how it goes. And the repeat appointments are not as many as before
Yeah.
because they might come for 2 appointments and then they think, I haven't got any more money.
Yeah.
So yeah, even the shops are struggling, everyone's struggling. So
It certainly feels
I
that
think,
way. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I think one cracks it when you become recession proof, maybe. That's when you've cracked
I'm
it.
sure you're heading that way with all the amazing stuff that you're putting out. Why gut health? What is it? What was it about gut health that really captured your imagination?
Oh, easy. Because I had gut issues for years and saw my GP, did the usual stuff, saw the best consultants, and they just said, we can't find anything. I had a camera up and down, and we can't find anything. Go back to your GP. I thought I just come from a GP. So, yeah, I realized at that point, gosh, there's got to be something wrong. They can't fix it. So I just lived with my symptoms for years. I just thought they can't fix it. I'm just a bit strange. But when I started
It's
GP
while you're a
training,
GP, what sort of age were you when this was happening?
oh gosh, about 2000, about the year 2000, when my symptoms started.
And so you were already a GP yourself at that point.
No, I wasn't a GP yet 2000. I
Right.
was GP 2009.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
carry on.
2000, yeah, so I lived with my symptoms. I just got on. And then when I started GP training, I started seeing people with similar symptoms like mine, kind of just bloating and gas. And then they would see the gastroenterologist. They would say, go back to your GP or try a acid suppressor, try Gaviscon. And I remember asking my trainer, I said, what's wrong with these people? The consultant can't fix it. And he goes, yeah, it's probably just uh, the mental health or is unexplained symptoms, medically unexplained symptoms. Then I started seeing things like fibromyalgia, just aches and pains and strange migraines. I've seen the neurologist, I've got all these anti-epileptics, and the patients just weren't getting better. And I saw this big pool, and there were no answers. So I thought there's got to be a reason for this. How come they can't fix it, these consultants? So I started researching again, and I go into all these health food shops, and I'll pick up supplements. And there's a food shop I used to go to all the time, and there was a gentleman there. He looked so healthy, and he was telling me about 90-year-olds doing marathons and minerals and vitamins and all of this stuff. And I thought, gosh, I don't know any of this stuff. How come this guy knows all of this? And he just seemed healthy. And he goes, yeah, try this. It's quite a good prebiotic. And I took this prebiotic and I felt better in 2 days afterwards. And I was like, gosh, how come I've never heard about prebiotic in medicine? Like, what are all this stuff? Probiotic, prebiotic, vitamin C, and all this. So I got really deep into kind of nutrition and started learning. And through that, I went to all these conferences in London. And in those days, I was the only GP there, one of a few GPs, and all the nutritional therapists were like, quite impressed. Wow, a GP in a nutrition course. I'm like, yeah, I like it. But now it's full of doctors.
Yeah.
So I think people realize that's kind of the way forward. Yeah, so I did a functional medicine training to kind of get better at this, and saw lots of people to help fix my gut at the time. Yeah, and then through all those experiences, I've managed to fix my gut. And then for years I'll go on these forums and I advise people. And I thought, I've got the same knowledge like the experts here. So my wife goes, why don't you start it? You just give all this information out. And that's how I started.
That's very cool. And remind us what you're called on. You're on Instagram and you're on TikTok as well, I think.
Yeah, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Gut Health Medic.
Gut Health Medic. I'll put it in the
Mm.
show notes as well. So if anybody's listening and they do have gut issues, and I mean, I don't know, do you know what the percentage of the what percentage of the population has gut issues currently?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I knew the statistics for presentations to GP, which I can't remember now.
Right. But I
But
mean, it
every
must
day
be
I
pretty
get up.
high.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Bloating, gas, constipation. Like I said, depression, anxiety could be gut health, poor immunity could be gut health, poor skin, acne, dermatitis, all related to the gut.
All linked. So if anybody's listening or watching this and they are experiencing any sort of issues that might be gut related, then check out Dr. Leke Asong. What I ask all my guests towards the end is what's your definition of success is now? And is it different to, let's say, 20 years ago?
Hmm. Okay, so before kids, I would just say success for me was just being happy. I just like being happy. With kids in the family, is being happy and my family happy. So if I can play with my daughters, I've got two daughters, after school, after work, which I can do now with no problems, then and then they're happy, then yeah, more activities with them. Then for me, success, I've managed to balance my life, my work, and my life, work-life balance. Very crucial.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing not just your career journey, but also giving us a little insight into what it's like to work for the NHS and
Okay.
maybe even how it can be improved. Who knows? Maybe, maybe one day we'll have another conversation and we'll say, gosh, the NHS is so much better now than it was in 2025. They've really improved things. That would be cool, wouldn't it? I'm really glad that people like you exist, who are just passionate about what they're doing, and hopefully your story will inspire somebody to think slightly less linear about their career and slightly outside of the box and realize that you can do a few different things and they can all complement each other, just like you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Just before you go, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for listening. And secondly, this podcast has grown purely through word of mouth. So if you think you know somebody that might enjoy this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could share it with them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do, because that will mean that you won't miss any future episodes. And finally, if you're curious about making your own career change, then you might like to join my online group coaching program, which I run on a regular basis. It's named after my book, Ready to Quit Your Job. And I also offer some one-to-one coaching as well. You can find out more about both on my website, which is yescareercoaching.com. Thanks a lot.